Ducks season came to a close this past May in a Game 7 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks in the conference finals. In this Ducks Live special off-season report, we will briefly look back at how the season ended. We'll also turn the page and look ahead, analyzing the moves Bob Murray made, including the deal which brought forward Carl Hagelin from New York and free agent signing of center Sean Horkoff to the Ducks. Then a little later, Brian Hayward sits down with Bob Murray for an exclusive interview. We'll also show you some of the team's top prospects as they spent some of their time here in Southern California while in town for a hockey camp. Happy to have you along here from the Grand Terrace outside of Honda Center. My name is Mark Rogondino, alongside longtime Ducks analyst and former NHL netminder Brian Hayward. Brian, obviously we got to look a little bit forward and see what's coming in the future, but before we can do that, we look back, and it's in another year with a Game 7 loss right here at Honda Center.
A tough one to swallow for the Ducks. They thought that it was their year. One game away, if you will, from the Stanley Cup final. The Chicago Blackhawks, in that Game 7 in particular, the stars of the Blackhawks, Jonathan Toews in particular, Patrick Kane, and Brandon Saad, I thought really elevated their game. Anaheim did not have an answer. And I think it showed the championship pedigree of the Blackhawks, and certainly gives the Ducks something to shoot for.
Yeah, and last thing about that Game 7 loss, does this one have a different feel than maybe the one in the previous 2 years?
It does for me. Number one, it happened in the conference final, so in that respect, the Ducks certainly took a step forward, but it still has the same hollow feeling afterward in that you felt like in Game 7, when you had the opportunity to advance, that they did not play their best game. And that's what the biggest concern is for this Anaheim team moving forward. We'll get into some of the reasons that Bob Murray has made some of the changes. I think it's because he wants to address that.
A lot of different news came out after you lose a Game 7, some positive, some maybe in a little bit of a dimmer light. One of those, I think, would be Ryan Getzlaf, and the news of an injury he was playing with throughout the postseason, maybe part of the reason he didn't have some huge numbers.
And we wondered about Ryan Getzlaf during that series in particular against the Blackhawks. I know a sports hernia had been bothering him for some time, and they don't get better, folks, without an extended amount of time that you're able to rest and recover, or surgery. Getzlaf will not require surgery during the offseason, but it certainly hampered his play. When you lose your best player, at least his effectiveness, when the chips are all on the line and you're playing against a centerman like Jonathan Toews, you know, I don't like your chances for a great result, and that's what we saw in Game number 7. And that matchup was curious to me. It was Getzlaf head-to-head against Toews in Game number 7 and did not work out so well.
Now, Brian, at the other end of the ice, of course, Frederik Andersen really coming into his own light this season as a whole, and he goes the distance in this playoff series. A big reason why the Ducks went so deep into the NHL playoff run.
Freddie Andersen's going to turn 26 in October. This was really his first extended playoff appearance. The previous spring, he was injured against the Dallas Stars. And I thought he was terrific. He did look like he was starting to wear down. And I think it's also part of the reason why the Ducks have addressed maybe a lack of depth in the goaltending department. They know they've got Andersen. They know they've got John Gibson. They pick up Anton Khudobin, who is a guy who can really play and will factor into the three-man goalie mix here in Anaheim. So Freddie had a phenomenal year. I thought overall he was terrific through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. He did look a little tired to me in the last round against Chicago.
Now, you mentioned some of the new names that will come in for this next upcoming NHL season. Some other names also, Carl Hagelin, who came over from the New York Rangers, highlighting a busy offseason for Bob Murray and the Ducks.
The luxury that Bob Murray and the Ducks have is that they have cap space as much or more than almost any other team. It allows them to look at the teams that are in trouble with the cap and to cherry-pick some of their better players. And that's the story of the Hagelin trade from the Rangers. The Rangers knew they weren't going to be able to sign him because of their own cap issues. The Ducks had space, and this is a significant deal for Anaheim. He has a ton of speed. Remember, 2 years ago, Bob Murray said he needed to get quicker. This might be the fastest player in the Western Conference that they've just added.
You know, Brian, another move that seemed to generate some headlines here in Southern California was the arrival of defenseman Kevin Bieksa. How do you expect him to contribute in this upcoming NHL season?
Well, certainly on the leadership side, I'm expected that he's going to have a significant voice inside the Anaheim locker room. Him and Ryan Kesler, they're great friends, and I think it's a little bit of a new voice coming in from Vancouver. Remember, the Canucks were a team that won an awful lot, and they had Kesler and Bieksa together. So I think he'll play that role, certainly. He'll add toughness. When you think about Francois Beauchemin leaving, Kevin Bieksa coming in, Bieksa's a year younger. He's a little bit more mobile. He's equally as tough, if not tougher. The Ducks feel that they have upgrades.
So when you look at some new names coming in, obviously there has to be some older faces that Ducks fans are familiar with that are exiting the door. You mentioned Boschman, but he's not the only one.
Emerson Edom leaves, Kyle Palmieri leaves. It is interesting when you look at it because Anaheim has given away some younger players that you always felt like they had not quite realized their full potential. Maybe they decided that that was their full potential. So they leave Anaheim. They bring in some veteran players, not only through trades, but through free agency as well, because this is the Ducks window right now. They want to win a Stanley Cup right now. They know that they've got a window of probably 2 or 3 years. And if we talk about the free agents, we talk about players like Chris Stewart, a potential left winger on the top line, and we talk around Sean Porkoff. Remember, Nate Thompson's got shoulder surgery during the offseason, probably will not be available until January. So in the addition of Borkoff, he could step right into the role that Nate Thompson played so well last year.
In a short answer, is this roster stronger now than when they finished in Game 7 against Chicago?
I believe that it is. I think they're deeper. I think they have more experience. They have more leaders inside the locker room, and that might be the biggest thing of all.
Well, General Manager Bob Murray, the architect of many of these moves made here in the offseason for your Anaheim Ducks. And when we come back, you'll get an opportunity to hear from him. He sits down one-on-one with our own Brian Hayward when we return on this special edition of Ducks Live.
I talked to Kess about it, I talked to Getz about it in the last week and a half. This is the time.